When we see these acts of extreme violence in the news, our first instinct is often to label the person responsible as just evil or maybe mentally ill. But what if that whole mad terrorist idea is one of the biggest misunderstandings out there? Decades of research actually point to something way more unsettling, that the roots of extremism might be found in totally normal human psychology. So let's dive in and really explore that. It's the first question so many of us ask. I mean, it seems logical, right? To do something that terrible, a person has to be psychologically broken in some fundamental way. It feels like it should be the right explanation. But is it? Well, the research is surprisingly clear on this. For decades, study after study has shown that no, mental illness is not a major cause. So, if it's not about a person being broken, then what is it about? What's really going on? And this is the real puzzle. If there's no single terrorist personality we can just identify, then how does someone get from being a regular person to that? Well, psychologists have actually developed a kind of roadmap to help us understand that journey. This framework is our roadmap. It shows us that it's not about finding one broken part in a person's brain. Instead, it's about understanding a whole psychological climate, a mix of their worldview, their vulnerabilities, and their personal tendencies. So let's break down each one of those elements. Okay, so it all starts with the foundation, a person's worldview. You can think of this as the psychological soil and atmosphere, where the seeds of extremism just might, be able to take root. Think about your worldview as the operating system for your brain. Seriously, it's that set of background assumptions you have about reality, about what's right and wrong, and about how society is supposed to function. It shapes how you interpret literally everything that happens to you. So what kinds of worldviews create this fertile ground? Well, research points to a few key traits. There's authoritarianism, which is this deep respect for authority paired with aggression towards anyone outside the group. There's dogmatism, a super rigid black and white way of thinking. And then there's apocalypticism, this belief that a final world-ending battle is right around the corner. When these start to combine, they can create what's called a fundamentalist mindset. And that fundamentalist mindset isn't just about what people believe, it's really about how they believe it. It's about seeing the world in terms of pure good versus pure evil, no gray areas. It involves a deep paranoia towards outsiders, and often a powerful trust in a charismatic leader who claims to have all the answers. Okay, so once this worldview, this climate, is in place, certain psychological vulnerabilities can act like an open door, making a person much more receptive to an extremist group's message. Now, what's absolutely critical to understand here is that these vulnerabilities are not abnormal. Not at all. They are universal human needs. We all need meaning. We all need to feel like we belong, and we all react really strongly to injustice. When those core needs go unmet, they create a void, and extremist groups have become experts at promising to fill that void. This quote really highlights the incredible power of belonging. It shows that for many people, they aren't even drawn to the abstract ideology at first. They're drawn to the community. The promise of brotherhood, of family, of a place to finally fit in. That's the initial hook. The ideology often comes later. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, propensities. So with the worldview set and those vulnerabilities wide open, these are the psychological triggers that can push someone from just believing something to actually acting on it. This is what really tips the scales. The motivations are maybe surprisingly really varied. It is not a one-size-fits-all situation. For some people, it's about gaining status or seeking adventure. For others, it's a burning desire for revenge. And sometimes, it's as practical as needing a steady income or just a place to live. Attributional style sounds a little academic, I know, but it's really just how we explain the things that happen to us. Someone who's prone to extremism often has a very negative style. So when something bad happens, they don't see it as a temporary or isolated event. Instead, they blame an entire outside group, they see the problem as permanent, and they feel like it poisons everything in their life. This is how a personal grievance can morph into an entire worldview. And this gets amplified by something called hostile attribution bias. It's almost like wearing a pair of glasses that makes everyone look like an enemy. You start seeing neutral actions as malicious attacks, which just constantly reinforces that feeling of being persecuted. But how does a person actually cross the line from just believing something to committing violence? Well, the answer often lies in what's called moral disengagement. It's a series of mental tricks that we use to basically turn off our conscience, convincing yourself you're serving a higher cause or dehumanizing victims so they don't seem like people anymore. This is what makes the unthinkable suddenly seem possible. So we have the climate of a worldview, the openings from our vulnerabilities, and the final push from our propensities. So what does this all add up to? What's the single biggest takeaway here? The conclusion from the research is pretty clear. Searching for a single terrorist profile was basically a dead end. It is far, far more useful to understand the process, the actual pathway that leads a person down this road. So at the end of the day, we're not really talking about monsters. We're talking about a kind of perfect storm, a rigid worldview combined with deeply human needs that go unmet, all mixed with certain motivations that, in the wrong time and place, can lead someone down a very, very dark path. And this leaves us with a final and pretty challenging question. If the roots of extremism are actually found in normal human psychology, in our needs for meaning and belonging and justice, what does that actually mean for prevention? How do we build societies that meet these fundamental needs in healthy ways so that no one feels they have to turn down a destructive path just to find them?